So Alex Jones is being fake sued in a fake court case and has been ordered to pay a fake $45 million. Just reading stories, I haven't really read any stories about it, but just seeing the stories. It's so funny. Like, even before I understood a lot of this stuff, we're going back to, I don't know, the early part of the century. I had a vocal coach who was really into Alex Jones. I had never heard of him before. And she gave me these videotapes to borrow on VHS. You gotta watch this. This guy goes into Bohemian Grove. And I'd heard of Bohemian Grove, and it was some sort of like secret squirrel Satanist meetup place or whatever. And he gets in and he films in there. And I'm like, so I take it home, I watch it. I was dubious before he even put it in. But, after putting it in and watching it, I'm like, that's no fucking way. Like, try to get backstage at a Bruce Springsteen concert, right? It's not going to happen just by waltzing in. So the fact that this guy got in there with the camera, with the early part of the century camera, they weren't little, you couldn't do it on your phone back then, and filmed all this stuff. I don't know, that doesn't pass the smell test with me. And then as the years rolled on, it just became very clear to me that he's controlled opposition. Jesus Christ. Oh, fucking lawnmower engine. You see some of that Cuba style stuff here sometimes, and I think that's what gives it its reputation as being a bit of a developing nation here. But yeah, I just knew, like, what they do is they figure out who their opposition might be to whatever thing they're doing, and then they create that opposition and they run it from the inside. This is how they've always done things. So he's absolutely handled. It doesn't really take much digging either to figure out his situation. I mean, you see the people around him who he's attached to by marriage, and it's not just because he's a tribes person. I mean, it doesn't always mean something, but in this case it does. And what he does is he runs out the concepts that they're afraid of, or the ideas that they're afraid of coming back to them. He runs out with them and screams about them in a really spurgy way that, like, you wouldn't do if you were trying to get people to hear your message, And then they come down on him for it and try to scare other people who might, be thinking the same thing. I mean, that's exactly what this current thing is here. They, that was a real sloppy job, that whole thing. There's so much of that all you gotta do is glance at it to see that there's something wrong with that whole story. That was really the first one that I got into at the time, where I had started looking at all these things, these events. I think actually the first one was the Dark Knight thing, the 2012 shooting there. I said, well, this don't make no sense, And then Christian Bale in the hospital. It's like, oh, this is all set up. So by the time that particular one rolled around, I was ready for it, And so I was there in the very beginning of when it happened. I caught all the stuff. The guy in the woods that was arrested, the plot line of the brother who was arrested, they dropped that plot line. It's like when one of these things happen, they throw out a bunch of different scenarios just to cause confusion and then to see what sticks. So when that particular one happened, there were all these different possible conflicting scenarios. There were men in the woods with guns. There was the brother who was arrested on the scene. All this just insanity. And then if you follow throughout the whole story, I remember watching online or the TV appearance of the coroner mortician. It's like a joke. It's like they're trying to mock you. That guy, I mean, come on. Like, if you can't look at that and watch that segment, and I'm not even talking about the Laughing Parker one. I mean, you know, I can see what it is, but there are some people that have that, you know, the plausible excuse of, well, he was nervous, whatever. But and Gene Rosenblum or whatever, the guy, the neighbor next door who brought the kids in and gave them stuffed animals or something. And then they couldn't quite figure out how old they were supposed to be, if they were young kids, or if they were like... The whole thing was just a mess. It's like they had like 10 different scenarios and storylines, and they just threw them together. It was like The Amazing Spider-Man 2. It was just like a mess of like ideas and possible plot lines that were dropped. And then they sold all the houses in town a year after. And it's not like, you know, all the houses that were involved. They just, the whole fucking town. The houses changed hands. And this stuff's like available. You can see it. You can find this information. It's just that you have to look in some non-obvious places sometimes. You know, I was always pretty good at research because I was doing research before there was an internet. I worked for my dad's company. It was a civil engineering company, and a big part of the job was doing research. In those days, it meant going to a town hall and into a must-see tomb and getting two men to take the books off the shelves and turn the pages, because they looked like field books, right? Like ones that you would, those little field books that engineers hold when they're out. Well, they used to back when before everything was computerized. And so it's in the shape of a field book, but it's sized up for like a giant to use. It takes two men to open these little field books. They weren't little in the scale they were in. And I never really thought twice about it. I'm just like, oh, come up on the ladder. We have to get this off. I never thought, like, who the fuck's using this thing? How are you taking this out in the field? These are field books, right? They're field books for giants. But that's the whole thing about the veil. You know, the technology failing and the scales over the eyes. Like, you see it, you're looking at it, but something isn't clicking in your mind to say, hey, wait a minute, why are these things so huge? Why are you taking two men to take this book off the shelf? What the fuck is this all about? But anyway, that's how you do your research. A lot of microfiche. And sometimes, like, you'd be following the logical thing, like, well, let's dig into, you know, the family records or maybe medical records or something. Property records have a lot of information in them that I don't think a lot of people think about. When property changes hands, it gives you like all the information on that person, financially, all this other kind of stuff that can give you a lot of info that you normally wouldn't be searching for. I mean, how many people, when they're trying to do a deep dive on like a doctor or something, say, you know, I wonder what his real estate purchases were. Did he make any? You know, that, and from there you get a whole different tree of information. So the information aids just made that easier, basically. So I'm pretty good at that stuff. Not great, but, you know, competent. And apparently a lot more competent than most, because how can you look at any aspect of that whole story and say that, yeah, that checks out? You can't. Yeah, unless you're developmentally disabled. So that whole thing was a sloppy job, Mossad. When you say sloppy job, Mossad, that was the ultimate sloppy job, Mossad. So anyway, you know, they want people to not be able to talk about it. So what they do is they get him there to get brought up on fake charges, to go through a fake court case in which they find him fake guilty, and then he has to pay fake money. And what that does is the ruling helps to establish parameters going forward as to what you can and can't say. Just as a side effect, it scares people from talking about it, of course, but it sets precedent that gives them a lot more emergency powers, you know, just like in the same way the Patriot Act was meant to listen in on Arabs on phone calls. It was used really for all kinds of things that you couldn't imagine. And that wasn't something they discovered, like, hey, we could use this for this. No, they planned to use it for that in the first place. And then they create a scenario. It's the, what is that word? I don't know. It's problem solution, you know, thing. The hider. I'm not going to go for it because I'm going to totally butcher it. I'm going to butcher it. So that's what it is. I mean, it's not. He's being used to try to get people to shut up about it and be quiet about it, you know. And it'll work. It'll work, especially if it helps them to make new laws, or, you know, make it harder for people to talk about something like that, or not be able to legally to talk about something like that. That was the whole thing. I mean, it immediately shuts people up to begin with, because, you know, well, Alex Jones just got in trouble for it. He didn't. He didn't get in trouble. It's all show. It's all show. He's their guy. This is his job. He's there for this kind of stuff. He's supposed to do that. But that's how they do things. They figure out the end result they want first, and then they coordinate things so that it leads them to that end result that they want. And also, when you control every aspect of the media, it's very easy. And then your average guy that's just trying to make money so his family can eat, you know, talk to him about it, and he'll tell you this completely erroneous story that the narrative that they've given to the average man, you know. So all you can really do is watch and just be like, man, that's, you know, it's the Cassandra situation, you know. It's like, you see it. You see the train coming. And there's nothing you can do about it, you know. And it's not that, you know, people are stupid. I mean, yeah, I do go through those times of frustration where you're just like, everyone is a fucking retard. But that's not the case. I mean, people just don't have the time to cast a critical eye on some of this stuff. And there's no, like, context for it. Like, why would they? Because unless you know that there's something up, you're not looking for the same things that would be signifiers to tell you that, you know, what you're hearing isn't real. But, oh yeah, he's, it's all, I just read the news stories, the headlines, I'm just like, you know, what are you going to do? I mean, that was a crazy event, but that's not the hill to die on. Like, you know, it's better to stay in the game, you know, and not go completely ham on that specific thing. Although it was so retarded, the whole thing. What a bad job. And it's like, were they always this incompetent? And that people just were so deeply behind the veil that they couldn't see that this was always going on? But I think it's a combination of things. I think people are a lot more dumbed down, unfortunately, like Unplugged, or dumbed down. Like I said, some of these people are just trying to get through life and make enough money for their family. They don't have time to sit around on the internet looking at this stuff. And there's no reason to, because in their mind, why would you look at it in that way? Because they don't have any past experience that should tell them to do that. So, I mean, I get it. It's frustrating, but I get it. All right. Stop blaming the teacher. Blame the school.